So let's talk a little bit about the design approach on the e-learning campus. First of all, I'd like to have a balanced approach to education. There's an emphasis a lot of times when you go into the classroom to do a lot of memorization just for the sake of passing an exam. In this distributed environment, the blended learning environment, we're able to focus not just on passing the exam, but developing critical thinking skills that are necessary to use the knowledge that we gain in the classroom. So my goal is to balance the perspectives that we have coming into the classroom. Practical thinking, this is really about understanding the content that's provided. This is done through reading assignments, attending lecture, and some of the exercises that we've incorporated into the learning materials like compare and contrast. In addition to knowing the content, it's very important for us to begin developing critical analysis type thinking skills about that content. This is done through the exercises that learners are doing outside of the live lecture. But broken down into the lecture materials, we also have discussion questions that are very probing, meant to drive more critical thinking. I ask questions that have the end of it, tell me why this is the way that it is, so that students have to analyze the situation and come up with their approach for why the circumstances exist. We also want to evolve the learner's creative thinking. This is particularly important to the level of relevancy of the information that they're gaining from the learning environment. If I don't understand what's in it for me, how I'm going to use this information in my job, then I'm not going to be as engaged in the learning experience. So we want to develop a high degree of relevancy of the material for learners. The last part of this is obviously we want everyone to pass their certification exams. It's a very important part of ensuring the success of you as an IT professional. So there are exercises like our mind mapping exercises, our exam prep and review sessions, going through sample questions together that are meant to also fulfill the requirements of helping learners pass the exam. Now, I wish it could be an even balance between all four perspectives, but we know that that's going to be impossible. So about 60% of this is the lecture. That's where you're getting the content and developing an understanding of the core principles within your framework. The exercises represent about 25% of the time that you'll dedicate to the class. Reading is about another 10%, and then of course exam preparation is around 5%. So although I'd like it to be balanced, we do know that there is a heavy emphasis on lecture, with exercises being the second most important part of the curriculum. Most of the course materials are based upon Bloom's taxonomy. Now, at a foundations level of knowledge, it's really about just understanding the key concepts and being able to talk with other individuals who have studied the same theory. But when we begin applying and analyzing the information that we're learning, we're actually elevating that learning experience to a higher level in Bloom's taxonomy. So our goal is to keep our learners in the e-learning campus as well as within the live lecture really around Bloom's higher levels of learning, so that they develop the high level thinking skills that are necessary to use this information within their jobs. Let's talk a little bit about the live lecture environment. So first of all, one of the things that we do, and this is a very important connection between what happens in the physical classroom and what happens outside of the classroom, we're actually going through the homework assignments. They are formally graded with rubrics that explain the breakdown of the point totals that students are provided. This provides a great basis to understand where did I not quite get the assignment at the highest level of thinking that is preferred as an outcome of the course. We go through those together as a group once we come back into the live classroom. It's very important to develop dialogue. We actually hand over the control of the live lecture to the team that's come up with the highest point total presentation, and they're able to walk other teams through their view of a solution to some sort of problem-based learning. We also do a lot of kind of interactive training within the live lecture itself by putting up kind of a splash screen called these visual learning templates that are really designed to drive interaction with our learners. I'm going to show you some of these, but we have polling, brainstorming, compare and contrast, questions, screen markups, you name it, there's a lot of stuff in there. This provides us also the ability to co-create material. You never know what's going on in the background of a student's work environment, or maybe they're taking the class remotely from home. So that a lot of times they're going to stay on mute. So these opportunities provide us an ability to collaborate without actually having to come off mute. In addition to that, we also summarize all of our learning units, the top things you need to remember. Again, this is kind of geared towards exam prep, helping the students to understand the relevancy of the content that they've just conquered. Now, in addition to that, we also hold review sessions, which are meant to go all the way back to the beginning of the course, hit the high points, and give learners an opportunity to actually ask questions around things that they may now understand a little bit better and need to probe a little deeper. So, all of these techniques are meant to provide a much more interactive live lecture. Let's take a look at some of these. Of course, polling is an easy one. It's very comfortable to put this at the beginning of an exercise when you're trying to get your students to begin engaged. A lot of times the learners may show up, they might be a little bit nervous about using the technology. So the polling question is just meant to say, hey, have you done this before? Give me a green check. If you haven't, give me a red X. And it's just meant to, it helps the facilitator to actually identify those learners that are going to have more real world experience, so that they can call on them when we're posing questions. In addition to that, we like to do brainstorming exercises. Now, brainstorming is a technique that probably many people have used, but the whole goal is to not comment on it until we have a full screen worth of comments. And then we kind of go through and identify those key concepts that are most aligned with the brainstorming session. So it does create a lot of kind of free-form thought through an exercise online. One of my favorites is compare and contrast. I like to take two opposing topics and make the students compare and contrast. Tell me, how are they the same? How are they different? Give me an example of one versus the other. How do they interface with one another? This is a very good exercise that challenges students to not just know the content, but be able to compare and contrast it to other content in the curriculum that they're studying. Discussion questions are where we're really able to ask some probing questions. Here, we're able to develop a lot more relevancy to the learner's live work environment. How do you do this in your environment? Give me an example. Or how would you solve this in your organization? How would you use the information? What's the maturity of this in your organization today? And here's where we begin to see learners really have a strong desire to come off of mute and exchange information and begin analyzing what's happening in their real world environment so they can begin using the knowledge that they're learning within the curriculum. Here's an example of the top things to remember. Here we're just kind of summarizing what happens in the unit. But again, in order to help students begin to prioritize content for exam preparation, we also kind of give them, here are the key concepts that are most likely to be tested on simply because of their importance to the chapter or their newness to the curriculum. These are just key takeaways from the material that students, if you're going to know one thing about this particular chapter, let it be this, because these are the important concepts that should stay with you for the long haul. Now, quiz time is actually shared between both the live and the virtual environment, and I'll talk a little bit about the virtual quizzes when we get to the virtual section. But in the live environment, not only are we reviewing what the students have done online for homework, but we're actually able to show how the instructor would analyze a particular question and answer by writing up on the screen, crossing out the things that are incorrect, and essentially applying that compare and contrast that we work on within the curriculum to the exam questions. And so this has been probably one of the most beneficial elements of the virtual environment, is being able to watch as someone actually walks through the test questions and eliminates the things that the students should be triggered as being not correct within the test questions. So this is very critical. It actually helps to increase their test-taking skills, which especially for adult learners, it may have been a while since we were actually in school taking exams, so it's a very helpful prep going into certification exams. Another thing that I like to do at the very beginning of the class is just to get a feeling for how students are enjoying the e-learning campus and the live lecture experience. So we can put this particular slide up. It's an assessment of the experience thus far, and we test kind of their barometer on how engaged they feel they are, how well they've mastered the material, how engaged they are in group work, the relevancy of the content to their job and to their goals within their career, and then how much support they feel from their peer group. So this is not a yes or no question, but from an instructor's perspective, if I see a lot of people feeling not very engaged, not very comfortable with the group work, I can address these issues within the classroom the next time we meet, and thus be able to take what could be possibly a negative learning experience and turn it into a very positive learning experience overall.